Whatever you carry in anticipation, whatever you expect or worry for our world, for the future, for our lives, let it go. Make space in your heart to be surprised. Make room in your soul for a new story to take shape. Let astonishment be possible at this life that remains a miracle. Imagine here a bursting of joy, relentless and resilient, coming in waves, washing over us with music and story and silence, and still this dreaming together, being hope for each other and courage to believe in this new day dawning for us all. Come, let us worship together. By Billy Collins. I don't want to make too much of this, but because the bedroom faces east across a lake here in Florida, when the sun first rises and reflects off the water, the whole room is suffused with the kind of golden light that might travel the length of a passageway in a megalithic tomb precisely at dawn on the summer solstice. Again, I don't want to exaggerate, but it reminds me of a brand of light that could illuminate the walls of a hidden chamber full of treasure, pearls and gold coins overflowing on silver platters. I feel like comparing it to the fire that Aphrodite lit in the human eye so as to make it possible for us to perceive the other three elements. But the last thing I want to do is risk losing your confidence by appearing to lay it on too thick. Let's just say that the morning light here would bring to anyone's mind the rings of light that Dante deploys in the final cantos of the Paradiso to convey the presence of God while bringing the Divine Comedy to a stunning climax. And let's leave it at that. Notice by Steve Coet. This evening, the sturdy Levi's I wore every day for over a year, and which seemed to the end in perfect condition, suddenly tore. How or why, I don't know, but there it was, a big rip at the crotch. A month ago, my friend Nick walked off a racquetball court, showered, got into his street clothes, and halfway home collapsed and died. Take heed, you who read this, and drop to your knees now and again like the poet Christopher Smart, and kiss the earth, and be joyful, and make much of your time, and be kindly to everyone, even to those who do not deserve it. For although you may not believe it will happen, you too will one day be gone. I, whose Levi's were ripped at the crotch, for no reason at all, assure you that such is the case. Pass it on.
Jane Hirschfeld writes, Zen pretty much comes down to three things. Everything changes, everything is connected, pay attention. This past winter, I followed the lead and advice of my church's principal musician, Carol Coet, and downloaded an app called We Croak. It's a simple app that reminds people 5 times per day that they are mortal beings who will die. This might seem a little dark or macabre, and it is both of those things, but it's also true. This recognition and reminder of our future and impending death can serve us as a tool toward more honest living and as a spiritual practice. This app encourages its users to meditate regularly on death and mortality and see it as the natural destination to which we are all heading, rather than viewing death as the enemy. And yet, despite the helpfulness of a mortality reminder, it is still absolutely appropriate to be heartbroken when someone you love dies, or when another mass shooting takes more lives. Our sadness is appropriate, and it can also serve as a window into our own mortality. As the poet says, although you may not believe it will happen, you too will one day be gone. I, whose Levi's ripped at the crotch for no reason, assure you that such is the case. This focus on our future death can really spark a passion for the present and can revitalize our commitment to live each moment more fully. Our understanding of death brings depth to our understanding of life in real and substantial ways. We can't understand one without the other. Or, as Kafka put it, the meaning of life is that it stops. Just like in our story from earlier, a deeper appreciation of life didn't start until death entered the picture in our story. Can you even picture an imaginary world where there is no death, but also no babies? On the contrary, death is the natural and as of yet unequivocal end to all of our lives. It is the uncharted waters that we must brave, even though we long for a safe harbor. And knowing this reality doesn't take away our sadness when a loved one dies, but it centers our sadness where it should be, on our loss, and on the impermanence of things that we want to be permanent. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke talks about impermanence as the very fragrance of our days. Listen. The great secret of death, and perhaps its deeper connection with us, is this, that in taking from us a being we have loved and venerated, death does not wound us without, at the same time, lifting us toward a more perfect understanding of this being and of ourselves. You see, death can serve as a reminder to us, but also a motivator to use well our one wild and precious life. Everything changes, everything is connected. Pay attention. Just this past spring, an extraordinary, but at the same time ordinary thing happened. The congregation that I serve ordained and installed me as their assistant minister. Much like the moment a few years ago where you all installed Reverend Luke as your minister. In these fleeting but weighty moments, congregations enter into a deep and covenantal relationship with their ministers. And at my installation, we heard from our lead minister, who was in her 20th year of ministry. She spoke a beautiful and important word about the river of ministry, about the specific passageway of ministry that twists and bends, forming many streams that branch off from the main river, while simultaneously being fed by many tributaries. The river of a congregation's ministry is consistent, though the tributaries vary. And the river itself takes on new shape, new dimension. She admonished us not to forget that our individual ministries, whether they last 2 years or 20, are also impermanent. Our hope is that this river will endure for longer than our individual tributaries, and it is to this work that we set our hands and hearts. Knowing that everything changes, everything is connected, pay attention. Now, you may be wondering about the title of today's message. The word worship has an etymology in the Old English word worthship, which could be loosely translated as worthiness, respect, or reverence paid to a divine being. This word was also used to honor people of high standing or royalty. But what does this word mean to us now, to a contemporary audience? What are the concepts worthy of our worship? And who are the beings worthy of being praised as having worthiness and respect? Whenever I use the word worship, I am referencing the thing we do at least once per week together in spaces like this, where we gather together to consider things of worth, to pay attention to worthwhile matters. Some people would argue that we worship the things to which we give most of our attention. In a recent discussion on the topic of worship, I heard lay people described as amateur worshipers. And at first, I clocked it as a dig, much like it might sound to some of you. But then it was explained to me that amateur comes from the Latin word amat, to love. So amateur worshipers can be translated as lovers of worship. In other words, the laity, you all, come here on Sundays on a potential day off to a worship service because you love it, because you want to be here, right? When you could be home sleeping or doing any number of things, you instead choose to come here and pay attention to things of worth. And you aren't getting paid to do it. Rather, you actually give your time and energy and money to support this institution so that you and others just beyond just yourself will be able to continue to come here and consider things of worth even after you're gone, after I'm gone, after Luke's gone, after we're all gone. You are giving to and supporting your church so that it will survive beyond you. And you have actually decided to pay Reverend Luke and me and other guest preachers to help lead and collaborate with you in this practice of worship, in the art of paying attention. For me, this has been a really strange, beautiful part of my past year. I have been a layperson and amateur worshiper. I have been a lover of worship, but now I am betrothed. As of this spring, I'm now ordained into the professional ministry, in essence, married to this work of professing the truth as I know it, the work of exploring and questioning the sacred, of praying and meditating on things of worth. Much like Reverend Luke did before me, I promised this past spring in my installation service to do this work with humility, courage, and reverence. And I also promised to bring myself fully to the work, even when it makes me sound aching and desperate like the poet Billy Collins, when he takes the time to deeply notice and cherish and write about the golden color of the morning light when it comes through his window. He says, "But the last thing I want to do is risk losing your confidence by appearing to lay it on too thick. Let's just say that the morning light here would bring to anyone's mind the rings of light that Dante deploys in the final cantos of the Paradiso to convey the presence of God." A bit of an exaggerator, I think. Or maybe just a noticer. But that fullness is what I'm committed to, and it scares the hell out of me. But I said it on the day of my installation, and I'll say it again today. I'm ready. I'm ready to profess the virtues of worship, the practice of paying attention, even when I don't want to, even when it's hard. Congregations ask their ministers to pay attention to some of the things that individuals don't have the capacity to hold and help synthesize. When you installed your ministers, you asked us to help draw your attention back to things of worth, to the things that pull on your heartstrings, to the values that we claim to hold even when we fail to embody them. This is a holy ask and a holy task. I don't take it lightly, and either does Luke. But worship, according to philosopher Paul Woodruff, is not always reverent. Even the best forms of worship, he says, may be practiced without feeling and therefore without reverence. To revere something is to look again, to perceive twice, to intensify your intention. But here's my question. Why in the world should I perceive something a second time if I believe that my first glance was complete, unflawed, and thorough? It's almost like reverence takes a sense of humility. I mean, if we understood the complex and multifaceted nature of reality, shouldn't we want to get a second look? Or maybe a third, fourth? Maybe change our perspective or even see it through someone else's eyes. One of my main spiritual practices is to take a morning walk around the pond by my house. Words are hard. It grounds me, it wakes me up, and more importantly, it instructs and invites me to pay attention to the natural world, to the changes of the seasons, to the plants and animals, but also to my neighbors and their houses and the sky and, you get the picture, right? There's a lot to notice. Recently, I was on one of my morning walks, and I was bringing as full of a sense of attention as I possibly could. I took my time, walked very slowly, and noticed many things. I maybe even got a little arrogant and thought to myself, I'm probably seeing everything there is to see this morning. I'm crushing it with this whole noticing thing. But then I brought a friend along with me as a walking companion, and she noticed so many things that I hadn't noticed. Now, with my arrogance fully deflated, I was able to understand quickly that with our powers of deduction and observation combined, we saw so much more. We saw turtles with their heads poking just above water that I just thought were sticks earlier, but she helped me see it was turtles. We saw the rather loud frogs that we had heard that were in essence hiding under our feet because they were so well camouflaged. We saw a muskrat gliding slowly through the water and occasionally playfully swimming in circles. This same friend of mine sees almost every single bird of prey that ever flies overhead because she's obsessed with them: hawks, bald eagles, golden eagles, any other kind of eagles. These big, majestic birds that I might not otherwise see because I'm looking at the ground or somehow lost in thought, she always notices them. So with her help, I stopped and noticed them. But then I thought to myself, how in the world am I just now noticing these things? What kind of basic, unobservant simpleton am I? Do these same frogs come out of hibernation every year and croak this loudly? How have I never noticed them? Or if I did notice them, why didn't I pay attention to them or remember them? But that's just it. The world is happening all around us every single moment. And there's no way we can notice everything, and that's why we need each other. I need to hear what it is that you've been noticing lately and what you've been learning from that noticing. Everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. To be clear, this is not just some kind of feel-good message about how important it is to put yourself in other people's shoes. This is actually the literal and scientific way that we are able to bring depth to our vision. For those of us with two working eyes, our two eyes give us our sense of depth perception. So, everyone do me a favor, lift up your thumbs to me as if I were doing a good job. Yep. Okay, now close one eye and move your thumb so it is blocking me out. Okay, now your open eye is most likely your dominant eye, but without moving your thumb, open your closed eye and close your dominant eye. See, even though you're trying to block me out, you can see me again, can't you? I'm still here. See, in your own head, you're receiving two visual stimuli through two different lenses. And because of that, your mind automatically calculates how far away something is, your depth perception. Taken on a grander or even cosmic scale, this same theory is in practice for our astrological measurements, right? As the Earth revolves around the sun and tries to measure stars that are very far away, they have two different vantage points to measure that distance. I mean, to me, this blows my mind. I'm not a scientist. But when we think about these different ways of noticing, our different ways of noting things of worth, our different perspectives can bring a lot of depth to our worship. There will be times when a minister might try to bring your attention to a truth or a beauty that you have a much deeper knowledge about. For instance, maybe you are an astrophysicist who is deeply embarrassed by my rudimentary explanation of astrology. Or astronomy, I don't even know. See, I don't blame you. Or maybe you've never even thought about that concept before, and you're glad for the moment to notice it and consider its worth and learn from it. See, we ministers try our best to be professional noticers of things of worth, but we won't be perfect, and perfection isn't the goal. Some of our interests and noticings will be rich for you, and some for others. I'm curious, though, what we can learn from each other when we share and discuss our individual takes on the worthwhile things in this life. Everything changes, everything is connected. Pay attention. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to do a bold thing, which is to turn to a neighbor and answer one very focused question. But first, I'm going to explain why I value this moment of connection. this practice of community with the people around you. If you were only interested in hearing good messages and good music, you could always go to concerts or listen to TED Talks. But people come into a place like this because they're ready for a sense of community, a sense of connection. And I know that turning to a neighbor, maybe even a person you don't yet know, is difficult. But here's the thing, y'all. We need each other. And if we can connect with each other and chat about a small question, then we might be more prepared to chat with each other as we try to answer some of the bigger questions, or support each other as we move through some of the tragedies and hardships of this impermanent life. All this to say, yes, I know it's hard, but I also know it's valuable, and sometimes ministers will ask you to do hard but valuable things, to notice and celebrate things and practices of worth. And lastly, this community, just like the one I serve, is held together by a covenant. And that covenant says that we will dwell together in peace and seek the truth in love. So the peace can't just be the peace that comes from not talking to each other and hence never encountering conflict. We have committed to walking with each other side by side while we make meaning of our worlds. In fact, just last month, 2 introverts approached me after my sermon and jokingly told me that they were going to avoid my future sermons because I asked them to talk to their neighbor. I smiled at them, I recognized their good-natured jest, and I celebrated the fact that 2 introverts had come together and bonded for even just one quick moment, even if it was bonding over my, wanting to avoid my sermons. So, for just a moment, we're going to turn to a neighbor. Feel free to find someone who you don't know as well. You get extra points for that. Say hello and ask them what things of worth they've been noticing this week. You'll have 1 minute each to respond, so keep it kind of brief, make room for the other person. And again, the question, what things of worth have you been noticing this week? All right, you have all done such a great job. And I'm going to slowly bring you back. Such a great job of sharing. Come on. I know sometimes people get a little shy or they're nervous about an exercise like this. But then when it's also this hard to bring you back, I feel like that's a really good thing. It's beautiful to look out and watch you all just connect and talk to each other. I'm not going to be here that often, I'm sure, but if I come back, I might do this again. And you're always more than welcome to do this in the social area. This is also one thing I do. I might give you a focus question and say, discuss later. So keep doing this. This is beautiful. I'm curious, I can't hear it right now, but I'm curious what you learned from your neighbor. I'm curious to hear what they noticed, and I'm curious to hear how you'll take this question forward. How you'll be curious about the equivalent to the golden light that reflects off the water that Billy Collins talked about. I mean, our answers might not be as poetic. We're not all poet laureates. But I think it's a good practice to ask people anyway. What are you noticing? Because you care about them, because you are genuinely curious, and also because you know it will help complexify your understanding and enhance your depth perception. Everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. And blessed be. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn number 209, O Come, You Longing, Thirsty Souls. Some of you might already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. And it's when we don't know these things or hold these truths that we suffer. Go in peace.